Welcome to Beyond Death, where we examine near-death experiences from people who say they have died, visited the afterlife, and returned. Today's NDE comes to us from the Ian's archive, and a woman who tells about meeting Jesus in heaven. Before we begin, though, I would like to give a quick shout-out to Louise Mickelson. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Thank you for your support of the channel and the super thanks. Now let's get straight into today's NDE. My trip to the other side was, and is, the most profound day I can ever remember. This happened to me right before Christmas of 2017, on what we in the US refer to as Black Friday, a day in which shoppers crowd into retail stores and fight for all the best savings. My cousin and I had planned our shopping strategy for weeks. We both had teenage sons that wanted the latest gaming console, and since they were good boys, we were determined to come through for them. At exactly midnight on the East Coast, the doors to the store opened, and the crowd that had been waiting to get inside and shop, some of them had camped out even, surged forward. With the initial surge, I found myself being pushed forward. It was almost as if I were 20 years old and surfing at the beach. Only this human wave could not be tamed. Looking back, I don't believe I made it 10 feet inside the door before the wave of people sent me crashing to the floor. The next thing I felt was someone stepping on my hand, and before I could even scream out for help, someone else had stepped on my back, driving me completely to the floor. I have no clue how many times I was kicked and stepped on before going unconscious, but I welcomed the blackness when it washed over me. The next thing I remember was floating above the crowd and seeing the chaos. People were running every direction. Some women were fighting, and security personnel was trying to get to myself, and several others that had been crushed when the doors opened. I felt absolutely no pain anymore, and in fact was very detached from what was happening in the crowd below. Without turning, I realized I could see better than I had ever seen in my life. I could view everything and everyone simultaneously, and in a complete 360-degree radius. I was also able to zoom faraway objects in super close. Now is when the tunnel started to appear to me. It was suddenly just there, floating slightly above, and to the right side of my spiritual being. Without even trying, I began to move towards the tunnel, until I floated just outside the entrance. I can't say that I was afraid to enter the tunnel, yet I do recall having some apprehension. Then I heard a soft, gentle voice say to me, "Come," and with that single word, I entered. I do not know how I knew to follow the command to come. Something just felt right about it, like a sixth sense or a gut feeling. I knew the voice meant me no harm. The tunnel walls were smooth and almost slick to the touch, and at the end appeared a small light that grew in size the deeper into the tunnel I traveled. The closer I got to this light, the faster I traveled. I was never scared, and in fact the entire trip through the tunnel seemed like the most normal thing in the universe. I almost felt as if I had traveled it many times before. It produced a feeling of going home when you have been away for way too long. That's the only way I can describe it. Finally, I reached the light, and this immense feeling of complete love, stronger than any love I had ever experienced while on Earth. This love bathed me in its existence and completely filled my entire being with happiness, joy, and contentment. If I never left this light, it would have been okay with me. I remember next came my life review, and I recall being shown a few scenes from my life that stood out, and that I was later questioned on. One was the death of my mother back on Earth when I was 9 years old. I could see now how that loss had affected every aspect of my life from that moment on. As a child, I had never really dealt with the loss, as I was now expected to help raise my younger brother. As an adult, I now spoiled my own child, as I was trying to give him everything I never had growing up. The light was particularly interested in the way we humans deal with death. I was never really shown anything bad I had done on Earth, and if I was, I do not remember it. As the life review ended, I saw two figures walking towards me. One was a tall man wearing a robe. He appeared to be Middle Eastern, and on his right side was a shorter female. When they got closer, I immediately recognized the short female as my mother, and I now made a good assumption that the man was Jesus. Jesus allowed my mother to approach me first. She hugged me and apologized for leaving me when I was so young. "That doesn't matter," I replied. "I'm here now and I am never leaving." My mother gently touched my face and told me, "Someday you will return, and then you will stay, but for now, you have to go back." "No, I don't want to go back," I argued. She smiled briefly before saying, "You still have more on earth to accomplish, and your son needs you. You will be going back." There was no way I wanted to return to earth. I demanded that I be allowed to speak with Jesus on the matter. I felt for sure that I could convince him to let me stay. I'd expected Jesus to either call me over or walk to me to discuss things, neither of which happened. Instead, I found myself in the greenest meadow I had ever seen. Jesus was beside me smiling, and he began, "I understand you wish to stay here in paradise." "Yes," I replied. Jesus stared at me intently for maybe 30 seconds before saying, "Why do you wish to stay?" I was getting somewhere. I could feel it. Jesus was actually letting me state my case for not returning to earth. "You have been down there, Jesus. You know how hard it can be to live. People are ruthless on earth, and here I have found nothing but love. Why would I want to go back?" How could Jesus argue with what I thought was such a perfect case for getting to stay? Jesus thought for the briefest of seconds, as if he already had his answer already, before smiling at me and saying, "Yes, I have been there, and yes, it is very hard to live there. However, we all have a part we must play in the universe, and while I completed my earthly role, your part is not done yet." With that, Jesus took my hand and began to show me many things to come for me in my future. I saw my son's graduation from high school, and then later college. I saw his wedding day, and I saw myself becoming a grandmother. "You see," Jesus stated, "your life has much left for you to experience. However, if you still wish to stay here now, I will allow it." I knew before Jesus ever released my hand that I was going back. I think Jesus knew as well. No sooner had Jesus released my hand than I found myself back at the light with the tunnel right next to me yet again. My mother was still there, and we hugged again before I left back through the tunnel. There was no sadness as with earthly goodbyes, maybe because I knew I would be back, or maybe because sadness doesn't exist there. Suddenly, I was back inside my body and in extreme pain. Security had me on a stretcher, loading me into an ambulance for a ride to the local ER. In all, I had suffered a broken hand, cracked ribs, a concussion, and a bruised kidney. I was held for observation until the next morning and released. Over time, I have often wondered if my own mother had been offered a chance to return to earth as I had been. If she was, then I have to say I fully understand her reason for choosing to stay on the other side. There is no greater love in the universe, and I cannot wait until I can go home again. Leave a comment below letting me know what your thoughts are on this NDE. As always, stay blessed.